This little girl had a husband when she was only 9 years old, and that husband was none other than this newborn baby. This isn't a fictional story. It truly happened in the 1820s in the rural Hakka villages of China. Back then, a strange and distorted marriage custom was common in the Hakka communities of Guangdong. Many poor couples, worried that their sons might never afford a wife in the future, would buy a young girl even before their son was born, a girl destined to become his future wife. From a very young age, the girl would start doing household chores for the family and taking care of her future little husband as he grew. Then, once the boy reached adulthood, the two could hold a wedding ceremony right away. For many impoverished families at that time, this practice meant saving a great deal of money. Xiao was one of those girls. When she was 7, her father sold her to a future husband's family, in exchange for 10 bags of flour. The woman who bought her, Xiao's future mother-in-law, had already given birth to 2 daughters. She believed that bringing Xiao into the house would bring her good fortune and help her finally bear a son. From then on, Xiao had to do countless chores every single day, sweeping the floor, feeding the pigs, weeding the fields, washing the clothes. All the while, she kept wishing that her mother-in-law would soon give birth to her future husband, believing that only then might her life become a little easier. A few months later, Xiao met a new friend named Min, who was 1 year younger. Min had been sold into a family just like this 4 years earlier. Her future mother-in-law had already given birth to 3 daughters, and she constantly blamed Min for being unlucky, for failing to bring her a son. Because of that, Min was often beaten. Sharing the same fate brought them so close that they became inseparable, telling each other everything. They would often kneel beneath a big tree and pray, hoping that their mothers-in-law would give birth to sons as soon as possible. Days passed like this, one after another, until the long-awaited moment finally came. Xiao's mother-in-law was about to give birth. Lying in bed, full of excitement, she turned to Xiao and asked, "Tell me, do you think it's a boy or a girl this time?" In her innocence, Xiao tried to comfort her and said, "Whether it's a boy or a girl, I'll love the baby all the same." But those words enraged the woman. She slapped Xiao across the face and snapped, "It will definitely be a boy." Xiao burst into tears and ran away, not understanding why her words had made her mother-in-law so angry. Fortunately, the woman did give birth to a baby boy. The family named him Li. From that moment on, Xiao devoted herself to caring for the newborn, feeding him, bathing him, and gently rocking him to sleep. Before long, under Xiao's care, the once tiny baby had grown into a little boy who could run and jump. One day, as Xiao was helping Li bathe like she always did, he covered himself with his hands and said he wanted to wash on his own. Xiao felt a quiet sense of relief. The little boy she had once cared for was finally growing up. Around that time, the family brought her some heartbreaking news. Her dear friend Min had fallen in love with a boy from the same village. For that crime, the villagers locked her in a bamboo cage and sank her into the river, drowning her. Xiao was devastated when she heard the news. Her mother-in-law seized the moment to lecture her. A woman must remain faithful, she must guard her purity. In ancient China, society placed unbearably strict demands on women. If a married woman was ever caught, or even suspected of being unfaithful, she would be tied up, sealed in a bamboo cage, and thrown into the river. Shockingly, this brutal punishment still existed in some remote parts of China as late as the 1920s. 10 years later, Li was 16, and Xiao was already 25. By then, Li had slowly come to understand that he and Xiao were not brother and sister, they were husband and wife. But the idea deeply unsettled him, and he deliberately avoided any physical contact with her. Xiao's mother-in-law, however, hoped they would become a real couple soon. So she invited a respected elder from the village to choose an auspicious date for their wedding. Xiao was overjoyed. This was the moment she had been waiting for over 16 years. Li, on the other hand, was reluctant, but under his mother's pressure, he could only agree. On the wedding night, the two of them sat in silence on the bed. When Li remained quiet, Xiao took the initiative to remove her top. But Li immediately stood up and tried to leave. "Do you dislike me because I'm older?" Xiao asked. "No, it's just that you're my sister," Li replied. "I'm not. I'm your wife. I've waited for you for so many years. I just want someone to treat me kindly." But Li turned away and left the room, refusing to share a bed with her. The next day, when Xiao returned home from working in the fields, she found that Li had already packed his belongings. He told her that he was going to Southeast Asia with his classmates to earn money. Xiao tried desperately to stop him, but he demanded that she obey him as his wife. Xiao didn't dare argue further. In that male-dominated society, a wife had no choice but to obey her husband unconditionally. Li's departure devastated his mother, and she soon fell ill. After all, many men who left for Southeast Asia to seek work never came back, including Li's father. To earn money and support the household, Xiao followed the villagers into the mountains every day to carry salt. One day, they encountered bandits. In the chaos, Xiao slipped and rolled down a hillside. By chance, a villager named Chun found her there and brought her back home. Chun was a year older than Xiao, and he often helped her whenever she was in trouble, carrying heavy loads, lending a hand with hard labor. Their relationship grew subtly complicated. But Xiao always remembered what her mother-in-law had told her, so she always kept her distance from Chun. Since leaving home, there had been no news of Li. Many people in the village said he had fallen ill and died on his journey to Southeast Asia. Xiao's mother-in-law was heartbroken, but she also feared that Xiao would be left alone with no one to rely on after her death. So she eventually decided that Xiao should marry Chun, the honest and steady man who had always been there for her. And on the very day Xiao was to marry Chun, her mother-in-law suddenly received a letter from Li. In it, he wrote that life had been extremely difficult for him and that he could not return home. He hoped that his sister would remarry and not keep waiting for him. Her mother-in-law happily told Xiao the news. Xiao was very happy that her husband was still alive, but she was facing a difficult choice. However, in the end, she still took off the wedding dress that symbolized a new life. She would wait for her husband to come home. After that, every night, Xiao literally counted beans to fend off the loneliness. From the days when her hair was black to when it turned white, her husband still had not come home. Time flew by. Xiao was now 80 years old. The Hakka Weiwu houses of Guangdong had become tourist attractions. Groups of visitors came and went, taking pictures and telling stories about that bygone era. But how many of them truly understood the sorrow of the women who lived through it?